Hey, book besties. Welcome to More Than a Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Leyna.
And I'm your other host, LJ.
And today we're talking about Outlander. We read the book. We got LJ to read the book. How many times had you started and stopped?
Twice.
Twice. So you made it all the way through this time. We had to
did.
push you.
Yes, there was a text at 45% where I told them I was out. And then they all came for me and were like, no. So,
keep reading
but we'll talk about that. We'll definitely talk about that because, spoiler alert, there will be spoilers in this lovely episode. So if you have never read Outlander or watched the show and you don't want things spoiled, I guess you got to go watch a whole season, read a book. I don't know. But
you have a lot of work to do.
You have a lot of work to do. But if you don't care, just stay with us. And maybe you'll hear us talking and maybe you'll be like, LJ's crazy. I want to go read this. Or maybe you'll be like, I'm with LJ.
It is, I will say it's a good book. It's not one of my all-time favorites, but it's a good book.
And I would agree with that. I gave it 4 stars because I recognize that it was a very well-written book. It is a good story. I think this was just not a story for me.
And I gave it 5 stars because there isn't a 4.5. I wish they would bring half stars to Goodreads.
I know, but
the Storygraph has it. I'm like, oh.
Storygraph has 4.25, 0.5, and 0.75.
Storygraph, you're pulling me in.
Yep, I'm trying to get her there, Storygraph. You need to sponsor me. Just kidding.
It is annoying sometimes how you can't give a half or even a quarter, because this is definitely one that I would say it's not a full 5 stars, but it's up there. It's close. Like you said, it's a really good writing. I really love the story, all of that. But first, let's talk about our book club, because we have met at Palio's Pizza in Frisco, Texas for 3 years. Ever since we started back from the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we always would joke that there was never anyone in there except for us, that we were keeping them afloat.
Yeah, we would wonder. We're like, there's never any, it would, at most, there would be maybe 2 other parties at a time. And we just could not believe. We're like, how are they staying open? Well, they're not anymore.
Surprise.
I know. So we had to find a new location. So we went to a new location. And when we walked in, I was like, no, because it looked different than ours, but it looked identical to a location that I had gone to and had gotten my favorite salad, which is the Greek salad with chicken. And the salad was so bad. And I'm like, I think this is the same one. And then when I saw the Pepsi products instead of Coke products, I was like, we're not having a salad. We're going to get pizza today.
And I wasn't going to say it, but I've been to the location that you were talking about, and I found a hair in my pizza. But I was like, I'm not just going to ruin everything for LJ today.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But I will say that when I was at the other location that you know about, the owner was there because they were having like a roof leak, and he was so nice. So I felt bad that I didn't like the food.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But that's okay. But yeah, so we met, and yeah, I don't know.
It was a different experience being at a different Palio's. This one, the door was mostly open.
Yeah.
I feel like too. It was cold.
It was very cold in there.
And Allie had this crazy hand warmer thing.
Yes, that we were all sharing.
We all need the link to, because that was amazing. And it basically heats it up to 100 degrees, and you can hold it and it warms your hands.
Oh, I think it's over 100.
Was
I think
it?
It's 113 when we were testing it out. And I was like, we could go warmer.
This was warm. It was very nice. I can see that at my work, holding it in between typing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that would be really good. I want one for sure. So if we get the link, we'll add it to the show notes. We already asked for it, so we'll see what we can do. But yeah, but it was fun to talk about it. I think everyone was nervous to get my reaction, knowing that I had read it thrice now, although the first 2 only partially. And I was enjoying it more until I got to a certain part. Now, here's what I will say. From the beginning, I paid more attention to details, knowing that I was going to talk about this in book club. And I have seen the first season up to where I had stopped reading the first 2 times. And I stopped there, partially because I was warned that there were going to be some tough scenes. So I didn't really want to see it. And when I was reading, it was easier for me to get on board with this whole polygamous situation because when the main like bad guy looks just like her husband and you actually see it in the show, it makes it easier to be like, well, I'd rather her be with this other guy. And the fact that she's in another time zone, that's the wrong thing.
Time period.
And we don't know if she's going to get back. So I handled that part better. So that's where I had always stopped before, is like right after that. But
for me, I had a really hard time with the dual husbands because she spends so much time trying to get back to her husband.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden she's just like, I'm going to go with this guy instead. Like, it felt like there wasn't a real turning point. It was just like, we're stopping and I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We didn't get to hear her thought process getting there. The only thought process we had was that she felt bad for leading Jamie on because she was planning to leave him. And so that's not the same thing. You know, if she had been like, well, my heart is being pulled a different way, it was like all of a sudden one day she woke up and she's like, okay, I choose him. And we didn't get to get there with her.
And I felt like she kind of did Frank dirty because she just left him. She had the chance. So I guess we should really rewind this and talk about the start of the book, what happened, the whole premise of the book. Because we haven't really talked about that. And the main character, Claire, her and her husband, Frank, they are kind of doing like a vacation after World War II.
Yeah, I would almost say it's like their honeymoon because I don't think they really got one. Maybe they got a little one because then they get married like right before the war.
And then they ended up, he was in the military and she was a nurse for the like.
So this was kind of like
War
their
II.
second honeymoon and they went here because his family, he had not family from there, but that had, what is the war that they're fighting or like battles going on? So I don't remember from history.
It's going to be the Battle of Culloden, but you don't find that out until the next book. She talks about it a little bit in this one, but this was probably, if someone is a history buff, I'm sorry, I might get it wrong. I'm trying to remember from my European history. There was Prince Charlie.
Okay.
I think that was his name. Charles.
Oh, no.
And
Charles, probably a Charles. I don't know about Charlie.
They called him Bonnie Prince Charlie or something like that.
Yeah,
but he was Mary Queen of Scots' son, I believe. And she was beheaded, right? I don't remember. They haven't made a musical about it, so I don't know yet.
Well, I watched Reign, which was about her in France, marrying the King of France, and then he like dies and stuff. I didn't make it that far, but I knew that's what happens in history. But I think that's her. And then she comes back and gets remarried and has a son.
We're not real clear on the history. So we'll start with that.
Yeah, there we go. We're not too clear.
Hey everybody, this is Leyna. Just wanted to put a little quick side note in here that I did some research, and Mary Queen of Scots, I'm sure some of you were yelling at the podcast. Mary Queen of Scots was in the 1500s, and Bonnie Prince Charlie, or Prince Charles, was from the 1700s. So clearly not related. The main battle here being fought would be Culloden. It was part of Jacobite uprising. So again, Mary Queen of Scots, back in the 1500s. Jacobite uprising was in the 1700s, and that's where Claire and Jamie are. Okay, I went and did some research, so nobody has to be yelling at their screen for this. All right, back to the rest of the podcast.
But anyway, so
there's a major battle. It's someone trying to come back to Scotland and take over ruling Scotland. But he's currently in France. He's exiled. And so that's kind of the war that's going to happen. And she is there with her husband in Scotland, and they're exploring the area because his family had ties there. And then
because he was related to this general, right? Or
yeah,
captain something from the British, the Redcoats.
Yes. And while they're exploring, they find some standing stones.
Yes.
Kind of reminded me of like Stonehenge.
Yeah, but smaller
standing
scale.
Stones, smaller scale. And she goes back later on in the day to go pick some flowers or something. And
yeah, like herbs or something.
Because she's really big into that. And she falls, like she hears this buzzing noise, and then she falls against the stone and then falls into it. And then comes to in 1743. So.
Yep. And then
she goes back in time, and then what's
interesting is like the first person she meets is her husband's
ancestor.
Yeah, like it's just crazy that that's the first person, and he's an awful human being.
He's an awful human being, and her husband had thought, just because of the records that they had of him, that he was this great person, and what a great, I have this huge military hero in my family, it's going to be amazing. And then it turns out he's just an awful, awful, awful person.
Yeah.
Which maybe they did that because that makes it easier for her to leave Frank. She can leave her husband because, yeah.
I guess. And so she ends up being, like, she gets away from him and gets picked up by the Scots. And at that point, had Jamie already been, like, shot or something?
Yes. He was injured.
So she ends up helping them, and they take her. Oh, and at that point, because the captain dude, he like ripped her dress and everything.
Bodice. It was a bodice ripper.
Yeah. And so she's like looking a little bit prostitute-y, and
well, that, and she's wearing a summer dress from 1945. So it's like above the calf, her calves are showing. It looks like a slip basically to them. So they think she's wearing night clothes out in public.
So she gets taken by them and goes back to the castle, and everyone's trying to figure out who she is and if she's an English spy or a French spy and all of that. And throughout, she's taking care of Jamie here and there. She becomes the doctor kind of for the castle, or I guess it would be a castle.
I think it was a castle. Fortress. I think it was a castle.
Okay.
Castle Lioche, right?
I don't know how to say any of those words.
I listened to the audiobook.
Oh, yeah. So I was looking up because I was like, how do you say? It's like Laigh.
Lahiri.
Yeah. How'd you say it?
Lahiri.
Okay, because Google said Leary, and I was like, so Lahiri. Okay, that makes more sense from the spelling. And then what was
She's kind of leery, though.
Yeah, she is. And then, was it Gilly?
Gilly.
The witch? Okay, Google said Giley. So, yeah, Google lied.
And I think
it was still right about mercantile, though. Just saying.
Mercantile.
But yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Oh, and then they leave to go get money for the tenants, right? And that's how she ends up having to marry Jamie.
Yeah. So I had read this like 13 years ago, and I've read, I think, 4 of the books.
Okay.
Maybe 5. I can't remember. But I was putting all of the books together, and I'm like, she should be getting married like any second now. When does this happen? And it's not until further into the book that she actually gets married to Jamie.
Yeah.
And it's because Jamie's uncle, Dougal, he has 2 uncles, Dougal and Colum. Colum he has something wrong with his legs. So they're bowed out. He can't walk very well, but he's a brilliant person, but he can't be the fighting warrior that his clan needs. So his brother Dougal takes on that role. So they're kind of like dual commanders.
Yeah.
So Colum has Dougal take Claire into town to go get the rents from their tenants. And while they're there, he also takes her to the Redcoats because he wants to get some information and find out if she's a British spy. And instead, they say, you need to turn her over right now. And if you don't, then we're going to have war. And Jamie also at this point has a price on his head. Like, he was accused of killing someone, but he didn't. There's all this history here. And Captain Randall, who is Frank's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, he had also at one point whipped Jamie to the point of almost dying.
Yes.
So that was kind of like the hidden Jamie's wounds, I guess. So that was something that had happened too. So there was just a lot going on. This is a big book.
It is. And like, Jamie thought that Captain Randall had, raped his sister, all this stuff. Like there's all this bad blood between them, even without Captain Randall being like a horrible human being. So then they have to get married to save her because then she can be protected by the Scots. So they have their on paper marriage, and then they have their religious ceremony, and then they have their time together.
So this was the part that kind of got me. She was drinking heavily.
Yes.
Because she was going to have to get married to Jamie, and she knew she was going to have to get married. And that was the only way out of this, other than going to Captain Randall, who would possibly rape and kill her. That was just kind of, they were going to send her to some weird prison or something, and she would probably die there.
Yeah.
So it was like, do I go with that route, or do I marry this guy who I don't really know, but kind of know?
Yeah.
So she decided to get married, very drunk. But then they go and consummate the marriage.
Yeah.
And they're like, everybody's listening for it because they want to make sure that it's actually consummated.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand that they had sex once. But it's not just once. They go like all out. It was just a little bit, I guess, implausible to me, because she went from, I need to get back to my real husband, to now I'm just going to have lots of sex with this guy.
Right.
And they had made a big point at the start of the book that they were coming back together, her and her husband, after World War II. And he had asked her, have you been with someone during the war? Because if you had, I would understand. And she was like, no, I would never do that. I would never cheat on my husband and all this. And he didn't answer that question.
Right.
So
do we ever find that out in the future book?
In the future books, you'll find it out.
Okay, we'll just pause for, or like, la 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 for like 5 seconds. Did he?
Well, from his future relationships, he does. Okay. I think he did. I don't know if they ever come out and say it. Maybe they do, but I can't remember. But he has lots of philandering after she eventually makes it back.
Okay. So he's not that much better than his ancestor.
He's a kind and caring person, but he's also a philanderer.
And so here's what I will say. Having not read that, I feel like that's like in books when an author makes a spouse a straight villain. And I don't like that, because especially if they've already been presented one way. I get it if it's like a matter of like, we're seeing the evolution of an abuser per se. Yeah. But what this reminds me of is a book that took place in Ireland. I don't remember what it's called, but I got it from Book of the Month, and it has like a white color with green writing. It's a very pretty cover. And that was the thing, is like this guy marries a woman, and then the woman he had always been in love with comes back, and like he starts an affair and acts like makes his wife this villain. I'm like, I hate that. It's a cop-out. So anyway, so I don't like that, but maybe that was already in his nature, but whatever.
I think that he was a good husband, just not for her. And I think that maybe, I don't know. I don't want to defend Frank. he gets his comeuppance eventually.
Okay. But you can tell me about that later off the thing, because I don't know.
I don't want to ruin it for anybody else that hasn't made it past this book.
No, but I am not reading on, because at book club, I was like, just spoil it. I'm going to need spoilers. This book is too stressful for me. I cannot be in this world and not be stressed out. Part of this is because of a Stephen King book that I read, 11/22/63.
Stephen King ruins everything. And everybody told me I would like that one, and I did not.
Okay, well, I really liked it. I mean, anytime they're going to visit, when he shows that it's all part of the same world.
Oh, that's right.
I love that. But seeing how people going back in time and perhaps changing all of the future, that stresses me out so much. So I was like, I'm going to need to know what happens. And so they just spoiled most of it for me. And I was like, why in the world would you think that I would want to keep reading these books? This sounds awful. And don't get me wrong. Like, Emily had read it 20 years ago. You read these, what, like 10, 13 years ago?
Yeah, 10, 13 years.
Okay. If I had read these 20 years ago, I was in a different stage of life. Like, I would be like, bring on the drama. Now I'm like, I need my roms-coms and my thriller sans romance. And I was like, I can't do the drama. It was too much. There was a lot of drama. There's a lot of, you mentioned Captain Randall, potentially, we think, he had raped Jamie's sister, Jenny. Yes. And so there was
sexual violence there.
Yep.
When Claire first found the Scots group, they debated, should we have sex with her? She looks like a prostitute. Like, there was so many times that inappropriate things happened. And not only that, but even when you get further into the book, Captain Randall and Jamie, there's just a lot of very strong depictions of sexual violence. And it made me wonder if that was truly what it was like at that time. Or
I believe so, because as you know, people don't. I actually finished the Ravensbrück book that I have been listening to since December. It's very long. It's about this concentration camp that you probably haven't ever heard of unless you read Lilac Girls. And I finished it today. And I will tell you, I had also heard this from a historical fiction book that, yes, like, it's nice to think that when, for example, soldiers come in and liberate somewhere, that there's good guys and bad guys. And the reality is, if you think back to World War II, even there were American men coming in raping women. So we want to think that, oh, our guys would not do that. And you want to think, in this book, it talks about there were a lot of Russians in this camp when it was liberated, and there were Russians who liberated them. And they were so excited to have these men from their country rescuing them. And then within a few hours, they're raping women. And thankfully, there were some higher up officials that came in and took over, and some of the men were shot, but not all of them. And then those particular women were unable to speak out, because if you think about it, they went back and it was a communist country where you could not insult the government. And so they never could tell their story until they were significantly older. And then the sad truth is, a lot of people didn't want to hear the stories because they wanted to forget all of the things. And some of the women didn't want to talk about their experiences. But I know from a Ken Follett trilogy that there's one in World War I, one in World War II, and one in the Cold War. And in the one with World War II, I remember one of the characters, when the Germans came in, not the Germans, the Russians came in. It was like Russians and then like British, maybe Americans, because you know how they split Berlin. And it was like the women knew that were there working. They knew it didn't matter what side of the war they were on. They were all, if they were found, were getting raped. And so I would say, because this is even earlier in history, I bet it was. Especially a woman dressed in no clothes to them.
Yeah.
It's sad to say.
Or a prisoner who is vulnerable.
Yes. And I, if we think about the stuff with Jamie and Captain Randall, I think there was such complexities there, which, as much as I hated all of that stuff, hearing about it when he talked about it, it was kind of like, okay, I think it was well done in a sense that it was not, you got to see the struggle in Captain Randall because he was jealous of Claire, because he actually favors men in a world where that was not okay, and where he needed to be this manly man. And that's why he told everyone that he had raped Jamie's sister. But we know she taunted him and figured out his secret, and he could not perform. But of course he wasn't going to say that. So anyway, but hearing all that of how he was clearly a messed up guy. I don't know his history, and I don't know if that's true stuff that, happened.
And I can't remember what happens with him further in the books, but there was one part where I guess Captain Randall had said something about, Alex, tell me you love me, whenever he was raping Jamie. And then Claire remembers Frank's family history, and it's his brother. So he was talking about, do you love me, like, to his brother while he was raping Jamie. And I'm like, what kind of messed up family dynamics are going on here?
Right. Like that. It's so sad to think about that.
Like, had he raped his brother? Like, it brought up all these questions. And was he doing this because of, who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
But if y'all want to know why, that is not what had me almost quit the book either. It was way before that. What made me almost quit the book is, first let's talk about what drove me crazy. So they get married, then, they're working their way still around after that to the different tenants. And then he goes off to do something, and she tries to get back to the rocks again and gets captured again, which I'm like, you're so stupid. History. You've already seen how bad this is going to work out for you. But so when he gets her back, he's like, I have to punish you because you're my wife. And so
well,
he
he
beats her.
punishes her because she
She
put everyone
disobeyed.
else she put everyone else at risk. Yes, she disobeyed. Yes, I get that. But at the same point, I feel like a big part of it was that he had to punish her because she put LJ's face. If y'all were on YouTube, you could see LJ like making faces at me. She's
I'm
shooting
not on
daggers.
board. I'm not on board.
But I felt like it was more of, and he said that. He was like, you put everybody's life at risk. It wasn't just mine, it was everybody in the party. So that was why he was punishing her.
No, I get that. And here, I guess here is why I really couldn't handle it at first. Is I feel like all I've heard about from you guys, maybe not from you, Leyna, but is that Jamie's like, oh, Jamie. So I'm like, Jamie's supposed to be
I
like,
am not 100% team Jamie.
okay. But like, so I feel like I've heard that. And so then I'm like, okay, we've met Jamie. Here is Jamie. Like, oh, Jamie. And then he goes and beats his arm. I'm like, how are y'all trying to sell this love interest to me when I am too feminist for this stuff? I'm the one, like, my mom has said to me, that is a good thing I was born in this century and in this country. Well, not this century, last century and in this country.
We're old.
Because I would have been murdered. Like, anywhere else, I was way too sassy and way too feminist from a young age. I was very much about what's fair and what's not. And I get the point. I think that it was probably clouded by that I'm like, I'm sitting here like all these people, not just like book club, but so many people have talked about how, oh, Jamie this, Jamie that. I'm like, this guy?
And
but
I really
get
think like after you get past that part, because so he whips her. He spanks her bottom with a belt, basically.
Yep, a bunch of times.
To where the
she
point where she
back,
can't
though.
sit. She fights back, and then he spanks her harder.
Oh my gosh.
So I totally get what you're saying, that it was inappropriate. Why would he do this? And if he's your dream book boyfriend, that's a thing that's like, oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
Also, though, I want to put it in historical context that this was 1743. I mean, when I meant to look this up, but I don't know for sure. But there used to be a rule that you could beat your wife as long as it was a stick smaller than your thumb. That's the rule of thumb. That's where that came from.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you told me, because I remember you said, do you know where that came from? And I said no, and then someone else said something, so I didn't ever get the answer. So now I got the answer.
So
I totally forgot about that.
That's the rule of thumb. You can hit your wife with a stick as long as it's not bigger in circumference than your thumb. And then even until, what was it, the 90s? If you were married, there was no rape.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, are we going to go backwards to that now too?
Who knows? I mean, that could be something that gets rolled back. Who knows? I mean,
I'm not getting married again. I'll stay single forever.
That was a big thing, because a man could rape his wife, but since they were married and that was her wifely duty, it wasn't considered rape.
Oh,
so, I mean, we've come a long way. And I had to think about this too. Back in 1945, what were common practices for husbands and wives versus now? Because it's 2025. That's been 80 years. A lot has changed.
That is true.
Women are fighting in the military rather than just being not just being a nurse.
No, right.
They have more options, I guess.
Yes.
So it's totally different than what it was back then, and even more so than back in 1745. And one of the things that really caught me, because we know that this bad stuff happens. He spanks her, for lack of a better word.
When you say that, it sounds very sexual. He beats her with a belt. Oh, I was trying to explain to my students why I was wanting to quit this book. And I said he spanked her, and they're like, oh, really? I'm like, shut up. That is no, with a belt. And they're like, ooh. And I'm like, never mind.
They've probably never been spanked with the belt.
Some of them might have.
Have you been spanked with the belt?
I have not.
I have. It's not pleasant.
I would imagine not. Yeah.
But I felt like there was such a big difference in the cultural norms. And even Jamie was like, I don't ever want to do that again afterwards.
Yeah, no, I loved that part when she basically was like, if you do it again, I will cut out your heart. And he like made that vow to her. And so then when I got to that part, which wasn't that much longer after, I sent them a text that like, he better uphold that or else I am ceremonially burning the physical copy of the book that I have.
And I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, he is a man of his word and he stands by that.
Good. Well, I'm not going to read on, so I'm going to believe that he never did that again.
So from what I remember from reading the other books is there's still extensive sexual violence. There's still just violence in general. The next book does cover the Battle of Culloden, which is like a hugely bloody battle. Tons of people die. It's just, there's a lot of good in these books, but it's a tough read. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. I enjoyed Game of Thrones, enjoyed reading the books, enjoyed watching the show, but it can be really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And I will not be carrying on, but that's okay. But
this
I
was
will
actually,
say,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
As I say, this was one of the first romance books that I ever read. And I only read it because it was a time travel book, not a romance book in my mind. And I was all about the time travel and I was like, oh, this looks great. And there's so many people that talk about this book because it's not defined by one single genre. Yeah. And I think that was a big appeal for a lot of people because it does have the sci-fi fantasy part of going back in time. It has the historical part because a lot of it is taken from history. Like she did her research well. And then there's also the parts of the romance and the family drama because you do meet Jamie's sister Jenny and you hear about her life. And I mean, she's keeping the family farm running with her new husband while Jamie is off in France and living with monks and then comes back and he just kind of doesn't show up. So she's taking on all of this responsibility with her husband. And I thought it was really crazy whenever they reintroduced the characters. She took a giant step back and let him be the laird, basically. Let him be the person that he was meant to be. And that I was like, that had to be hard because she had been running everything with her husband. Yeah. And then he comes in and like, okay, now you're in charge. And I was like, that had to be really hard.
It probably helped that she was like 9 months pregnant and was like, I need a break. I'm just saying. I mean, that would be me. I'd be like, you know what? I'm good. You go ahead. Let me put my feet up. Especially with a toddler and being pregnant.
Yep.
So, was he a toddler? He was a little bit older.
He was a toddler. I think he was like 2 or 3.
Okay. Yeah. So toddler. So yeah. Yeah. No, I'd be like, go ahead. I'm going to put my feet up.
But she didn't put her feet up.
I know.
That's why I could never live in the 1740s, is there's always so much to do. They were talking about making the candles. Yeah. And it took like a month to make candles. And I'm like, oh my God, like what? Did ADHD not exist back then? Like how did people function?
I don't know.
Because I would get totally distracted by something else and, go off on a tangent.
Yep, me too. And I don't even have ADHD or ADD or anything. But social media and phones and stuff, I really do buy into that. They've made our attention span shorter because I can see it in myself.
So what do you think would be the hardest part of living in 1743 Scotland? We're not saying electronics because that's too easy.
I think I hadn't thought about the hot baths until she mentioned it. And I was like, I'm so time efficient. So like, I'm like, how fast can I get in and out of the shower? That is, unless I'm freezing cold, then I want to move into the shower. So and that's just me. That's just a very me, time efficient, everything. You got all your list of stuff to do to check off. But so that I would say possibly that, but I really think it would have to be like, I think about that time of the month and not having products and not having painkillers and things like that. That is one of the things that I always think about. And
you could have willow bark tea.
I think that stuff would be really hard. And I really think the long periods of time without communication, because I'm such a worrier. I would be worried about everyone if I'm like, I might not hear from them for 6 months.
Or ever.
So I think that. And I also think just being a woman in that time period. I'm too sassy to be a woman in that time period.
Well, there were some sassy women. You
I
just
know,
had to
but
have a man that was accommodating.
yeah, exactly. That's what I would need. Okay, what about you? What would be the hardest thing?
My first thought was being cold, just all the
Yeah.
time
Oh,
being
yeah.
cold. There's no central heating. There's no electric blanket. There's nothing like
No.
that. And I had watched a show one time, and it was people going back and doing like homestead stuff in Scotland. And so they were living like they were
Oh
on
my
the
gosh.
farm, and they would be inside with the fireplace going, and they could still see their breath. And I was
No.
like, I'm out.
Yeah, that would not work for me. I would hate that because I'm cold all
And
the time now.
having to make your own clothes. I
Oh,
can't cut in a straight line.
me neither.
So I would
Me
be
neither.
horrible at that. And that was, I think Jenny was sewing something, and Claire looked over and she was like, wow, that's amazing. And just the fact that I would not be able to do that. I'm sure that I would have been taught that, but
Yeah.
my mom tried to teach me to sew and it went awful. So I can just imagine.
I mean, like, let's be honest. If I actually had been born back then, I would have died before my 6th birthday because I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at 5. And the honest truth is, when you're first diagnosed, you typically have what's called like a honeymoon period. And so your body's still producing some insulin, but usually within a year, it stops producing completely. And there's nothing you could have done about it back then. So I would have died as a child, you guys.
I would have been burned as a witch. I have
If I made it,
epilepsy. So
that's true. You
epilepsy,
would
they
have.
thought that you were being controlled by demons a lot of the times, and they burned people as witches, or they tried to exorcise the demons. So
You would have had an interesting life, Leyna.
yes.
Not a good one. And I would have just died. So I know it's crazy to think about that. Like, especially even now, just thinking about, I've been a diabetic so long, I don't remember what it was like not to be one. But every now and then I'll have a moment that's like, I should not be alive. Like in the evolution
That's
process,
so weird to think about.
right? Like there are so many things, like so many factors. So like just enough things could go wrong that I could be dead in a few hours if I like gave myself too much insulin. It really could be within a couple of hours, or someone tampered with that. And then when my insulin pump broke, we had issues with the sites a few years ago, and I ended up in the hospital.
I do remember
And
that.
like I'm telling you, like less than 24 hours, my resting heart rate was 125 beats per minute. I could not stop throwing up. I was ready to just roll over and just take me now. So, and that was less than 24 hours. So I can only, it would have only been a couple more days. But it's crazy to think about that because technology and stuff. So thank you to all of that. Okay, so let's talk about some of the high points that made us happy. Okay. So like, first of all, I got so excited when she saw the smallpox vaccine.
Oh, and we haven't even talked about Gillis or Gelly or Gilly.
Because that was when she was like, I'm a witch, take me away, burn me. And I was like, no, I need to know where you're from. Like, what time period are you from? And I liked that she was from a time period later than Claire. I thought it would have been really fun if she was like from the 90s or something, though. But
that would have been fun.
Even the 60s, if she talked to Claire about it, would still be cool for Claire to hear about. But you know,
guess
imagine
what happens
how much
in
difference.
Future books.
I know. I know. But I thought that was so...
If you want to explore that storyline, it does take place.
Well, and then I loved when the message got back to Claire where it was like 1967. And I was like, that's so cool. Just that she got that message to her and everything. And
so the character Gillis, Gilly, they pronounced her name 2 different ways. She was from 1967, it turns out.
Yeah.
And she had come back in time, and she knew how to get back and forth. And well, she thought she could get back, but she knew how to get there because she had made it happen so that she purposefully went, and she had called herself a patriot to the Scottish cause.
Yes.
And so,
and now that all makes sense when you find that out, because originally you're like, what, you're willing to die for this? Like, what? But it's such a bigger picture than what we're seeing.
Yes. And it's like, okay, part of me was like, how is she a patriot? Was it really just because Dougal was going around while he was collecting rent from people, was also getting people on his side for the pretender king to take back the throne? And so there was all of that going on, political intrigue. Like, this book has it all for real. But she was talking Dougal into doing this and kind of going behind his brother's back to do it. And it was really crazy that she had that much influence and was able to do that. And at the same time, Dougal and her were hooking up because she got pregnant.
Yeah, I know. She's such a cool character. I wish she had had more time in it, but I understand why she didn't at the same time. But I like
guess
her.
What?
I know she comes back apparently.
She's not dead.
She's not dead. Okay, another thing that I just loved was when they reunited after he took her to the Stones, and like how he did that was so selfless of him to not beg, just to accept that perhaps that's what she was going to do. And then when she came back, and then when he later told her like the real reason he wanted to marry her, and how he just knew like his dad had told him, and I don't know.
There were some very sweet moments.
There were some like swoon-worthy moments, so I will give that to Jamie.
And I think it's also important to remember that Jamie's only like 23 in these books.
Yeah.
He's young. He is a young guy. So he has some growing up to do. And I think in further books, he does that. Okay. And that's, I think, whenever he becomes truly swoon-worthy.
Yeah, I guess. But I'm not going to read it and
find out.
But y'all can just keep telling me about it. Maybe I'll eventually watch the rest of the show. But honestly, I don't know if I will, honestly. It's going to stress me out, too.
The part that really got me was when Jamie and Ginny were reunited. And she was just as fiery and stubborn as he was.
Oh, my gosh. I know. I loved that.
And their back and forth was just, I loved it. It was...
Well, I know. And they were not listening to each other. Like, they were both yelling at each other, different things on the same thing. And neither are listening. And neither wants to hear what the other one has to say. And it was totally like that. If you're going to do a miscommunication trope, that's how you do it, because it's cleared up really fast. And it's hysterical when you see them going at each other. And this girl that was like 9 months pregnant, ready to wrestle her brother, did do a little bit of physical damage to him, who's over 6 feet tall. And she's like an itty bitty thing, with her husband outside with his peg leg hanging out with Claire. Like,
because he's like, let's just leave them alone.
Yeah.
I grew up with this. Let them have their words. And then we'll go back.
Yeah. I know. And it was like, and then how insulted he was, thinking that she named her illegitimate son after him. Like, how dare you put this shame on me? And she's like, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh, that was awesome.
And the fact that he couldn't put 2 and 2 together, that the kid was like 2, and
that had happened.
Potential rape happened like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, so it was impossible for it to be his kid, and that was.
But I also think that goes to show that people without kids, well, even me having had kids, I sometimes have trouble putting the correct age with kids. Like, how old are you? Like, are you 7, 8? Who knows?
Right? I mean, it is really hard, especially when they're young. Like, it is. Even still, like, I teach juniors and seniors, and they'll be like, how old do I look? How old do you think I could pass for? And there are a few, especially a few of the boys that can pass for older because they're taller, they've filled out. And some of them, because there are a couple, because one day, one of my classes, they wanted me to answer it for like everyone in the room. And
were they getting out of doing work?
Yes, they were.
They're so smart.
But it's a small class, so it was okay. It didn't take much time. But I was like, yes, I could believe you were like in your early 20s, because you are very mature and soft spoken. You're not very dramatic. You're very even keel. And even some of the girls, like, if you come off as more mature and not silly, you're going to seem older. But then when you act like a silly fool, no.
That's what you're going to get.
You look like a 12-year-old now. Even if you don't, I will tell you that you look like a 12-year-old, so that you realize you need to shape up and do your work.
Shape up or ship out.
Shape up or ship out. No, but they're funny kids. But yeah, I mean, it's true. It's hard to, I'm not good at gauging ages anyway. Like at all.
And that was one thing that they mentioned in the book, because they thought Claire was younger than Jamie.
Yeah.
That in fact, she's like 5 or 6 years older.
Yeah.
But because women of that age would usually have 3 or 4 kids by then, and didn't have dental care or health care.
Right.
So they would look much more haggard.
Yeah.
So everybody thought she was young.
Yeah. But she
So
still was. She was in her 20s, but yeah.
yes, but yeah. Yeah. So you've seen the show.
Just half the first season.
Half the first season. You've read the book now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they cast Jamie and Claire correctly?
It made it easier this time because I could picture them. Still, like, in all honesty, I feel like the guy they cast as Jamie is a little bit too much of a pretty boy, honestly.
I think his hair is too different.
Yeah.
So I love Sam.
That's true. The way they talk about his hair.
I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I don't even know what his name is.
But he's an attractive man. He's big, broad-chested. He wears a kilt very well. I loved all of that. But I feel like in the book, they talk about his hair being like bright red
and
luscious, but shorter on the top. And then that just isn't translated.
You know what's funny? I mean, it's been a while since I watched the half of the first season that I watched. But I was like, is that actor even over 6 feet? He is. He's 6'2.5" or something. But I don't know why. To me, he didn't seem that tall in the show. So I was like, is he really? Or are they tricking us, trying to trick us? But no, he really is. But I don't know.
I do like Claire. I feel like they did a good job with her.
Yeah, I think they did a good job with her too. But I don't remember any of the other castings. So
the one that got me was Murtaugh. His little friend. They always describe him as short and has like a, not really talking. And I feel like the guy that they chose to play him is too cute. Like, he needs to be a little bit more toady. Like, if he was like a little bit of a toad, then he would fit in better. But
see, and I don't even remember who it was, so I'll have to go look that up. And by the way, if I disappear at all and poor Leyna has to like fill in stuff, I'm blowing my nose. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you know that. I've had to blow my nose several times. I think it's allergies, though, this time. It better be, because I was sick a month ago. So this is not cool.
Tis the season. I know my eyes were all red today. So I figured that it must be something in the air blowing in.
I think so, too, because my throat was so itchy. Like, I wanted to stick an emery board down my throat and like scratch all around. Because I don't know why. I imagined that would feel really good. I did not do it. Don't worry. But I imagined that would feel really good. And I did put some eardrops in, and that helped the itching in my ears. So, and
did you ever watch that show, Girls?
No.
I watched it.
Why did they stick an emery board down the throat to scratch?
But her ear is bothering her. So she takes a Q-tip and jams it in her ear and punctures her eardrum.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like, no. Oh. So whenever you said that, that's what it reminded me of.
I think I might have punctured my eardrums. Sometimes I will feel like I breathe out of my ears. So I think that I did something at some point. That's probably not normal. I don't know if anyone else has.
I have a hole in my eardrum, and it's burst. Well, I don't know if there's a hole. It's burst twice that I remember.
Does it feel? Do you ever have moments like that where you feel like you're breathing, like you might blow your nose and it feels like some air goes out your ear?
Well, you have
like it's all connected.
Here's an anatomy lesson. Your eardrum, all of that is connected into your nose and your ears, and then the eardrum is just a membrane. So I can imagine that air can move past that.
Well, I probably stabbed it with a Q-tip before too. I didn't today though, because but when I put the eardrops in and I like was staying there, then all of a sudden it felt like my hearing clogged for a second, and I freaked out, and I was like, and then like did the other side of I was like, okay, I can hear again.
Old remedies. There was one that was years ago. I had read about what you could do for earaches, and it was warm up olive oil and put a clove of garlic in there and let it sit for a little bit, and then pour it in your ear.
Oh my gosh.
And I did it.
Interesting.
And I didn't die.
Did it work? Did it do anything?
It did. It made me feel better, but it made me think of this type of 1740s. What kind of medicine is this? What am I doing to myself? I'm sure it's totally fine, but
I don't know. I think I do have garlic and olive oil, actually garlic cloves and olive oil. So maybe I should try it. I don't know. It's not
Google it first.
Right. Yeah. We'll wait another time.
I think mostly I liked it because it was warm.
Yeah, it felt
and
good.
it was soothing.
That makes
So
sense. So I could just put warm water in there.
yes.
Maybe. Maybe I shouldn't put anything in my ears at this point.
That's probably the best idea.
I'm thinking like, yeah, it's just not. Okay, before we say goodbye, do you want to talk about like any of the books you read in January? This is our last January episode. Do you have any that stand out that you want to
I
mention or
reread
recommend?
Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, and now I'm
Yeah.
working on Onyx Storm.
Yep.
So I was not going to do the reread of those books, but then Nikki
You ended up
Blake, who
doing
was
them.
our guest last week, she was talking
Yes.
about doing the reread, and I was like, fine, you talked me into it. I'm
Well,
glad I
then I benefited from it because you gave me your notes.
Yep. So it was nice to know what was going on, because I feel like Onyx Storm just jumps right in there.
Yeah.
Don't want to give any spoilers away, but a lot of it is like, who's this person? And I've seen on Instagram, there's a lot of people that have gone on their Bookstagram accounts and they've created like a cheat sheet basically of,
Yes.
here's this person, who do they belong to? What's their dragon's name? What's their
Which
signet?
Which, by the way, Leyna, if you need to find a really comprehensive one, you can go to our page and click on the saved, and there's a thing with it where I saved one where they had like, I don't even know how many slides, but I was like, oh, I'm going to need that. I'm going to need that real bad.
Because it does come in handy. So if you haven't started reading Onyx Storm and it's been a while since Iron Flame, I would suggest you get that and kind of refresh yourself a little bit.
Yeah. How far are you now into Onyx Storm?
I think I'm like a third of the way done.
Okay.
I think it was like 33%.
Because I know it doesn't tell you, it's like,
so I'm reading it on Audible. It doesn't tell you the percentages. So I'm like dividing the chapters by how many chapters there are. And that's like with Outlander, some of the chapters were 17 minutes and some of them were an hour and a half long.
Okay, so yeah,
like,
so even
holy cow.
Even me reading the digital copy, it said it would be like, 20-minute chapter, and the next was like an hour and 15 minutes. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why
the
are
chapters
you not breaking this up?
Way weird in that book.
It didn't make sense. She could have broken those up. Like,
so
I don't
easily.
understand. So easily. So any other books or is that mostly what?
I'm like, I'm going to have to look at my Goodreads.
I know, I got a list here. While you're looking up, I will see. Let's see here. Okay, so I have read technically 11 books because I finished Ravensbrück today. And I'm looking at my list here. And I will say, I'll just list out. I read The God of the Woods, highly recommend. One Dark Window, highly recommend. Listen for the Lie, also recommend. Sleep Tight, I don't even know. It was a horror book. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. Two Twisted Crowns, that's the sequel to One Dark Window, highly recommend. The Lake of Lost Girls, 3 stars. It was interesting. The Last Battle, which is the last Chronicles of Narnia book, gave it 5 stars, loved it. That's Not My Name is one that I don't even know why I read that one, but I gave it 5 stars, so I liked it. And by the way, I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh no, I do remember what happened. I do remember now. I was like, what was that one? I remember. 5 Total Strangers, which is, both those are YA, kind of. And I only gave that one 3 stars. It was only okay. And then Outlander I gave 4, and I'm going to give Ravensbrück 5 stars. Because whenever it's someone's story, like if it's a real story about someone, I'm never going to rate lower than 5 stars someone's story, because that's their life. And even if I think their life wasn't interesting, the fact that they were willing to share it, or this biographer sharing so many harsh stories, which I still would give this one 5 stars. But I'm saying I was
going to ask you, I was like, would you recommend Ravensbrück?
Okay, if you want something very comprehensive about a lesser known concentration camp where it walks you from its inception to post-war, I highly recommend it. It is long though. I don't know how long the physical book is. It's part of Audible Premium, which is why my like little cheap deal ended, but I had to stay for another month because I needed to finish it. I was like, I'm so invested. I don't want to have to buy it. So anyway, but I got a deal for that. So it was only $7 for 3 months. So that's not as good as, $1.99, but I will take it. So anyway, but back to you, Leyna. What did you read this month that you recommend or not?
I read The Reckoning by the Zodiac Academy #3, which I did enjoy that quite a bit. I would recommend that. I can't wait to get back into Zodiac Academy, because that is one of my goals for February, is to read shorter books, because I read so many long books this month. I read Codependent No More, How to Stop Controlling Others and Start Caring for Yourself. And that was a physical book, but I didn't count it towards my 10 physical book goal for this year because I started it last year and I only read it.
So
I did count. I counted the page count because our local bookstore, Neighbor Books is doing the pages. And so I was like, okay, I'll count the pages that I read, but not the book.
Oh, I would so count it. but I understand.
I'm a purist.
Yeah, I'm not.
I read Fourth Wing, Iron Flame. Loved both of those. I read The Funeral Ladies of Ellery County, which I enjoyed that one a lot.
Yeah.
Just a Midwest church-going ladies, and their whole job is they're volunteers. They bring food when people dies, and it's their family, kind of their history. But also, one of the ladies gets taken in. She gets catfished, and she sends thousands of dollars to this woman who is claiming to be a woman who's having a baby and doesn't have any money.
Oh.
And so this grandma sends thousands of dollars to her to help her out, thinking that she's going to get repaid. And the person just ghosts her. So then all the funeral ladies come together to help her save her house so she doesn't have to move out. So it's very sweet. I read Outlander and then the Kamigawa Food Detectives.
And that was the one we talked about, that one, I think, right?
That one was a physical book. So that was my first physical book. I finished it.
Woohoo.
And I actually bought that last year. I bought it last January because yesterday was my 1-year anniversary since my seizure. So I've been seizure free for a full year now. But that was after my seizure. I think I'd had 2 or 3 weeks, and Derek took me out to go to Interabang bookstore in downtown Dallas.
Fun.
So that I could get out because I was moping around the house because I couldn't drive.
Understandably.
So he took me and I bought that, and the cover sold it for me. It's this cute cat sitting in a Japanese bowl.
Aww.
It was an okay book. I don't think it was for me. It is a translated Japanese book, so I don't know if part of it was lost in translation. There was a lot of repetitiveness. So it's the second Japanese translated book that I've read, and both of them didn't quite hit the mark for me. So I don't know if it was just me. I was also disappointed because there's a cat on the cover and he only makes very brief appearances. Like he's not a big part of the story. And I wanted
do that to us,
the cat to be there.
Yeah. We are cat ladies. Give us the cats. Don't kill the cat.
I was at Barnes & Noble a week ago, dropping my kids off at the mall, and they had this cute collection of books. I can't remember what it was called now, but they had cats set up all around it, and it was so adorable. But then I picked it up, and it was another Japanese translated book series that had cats, and I'm like, I don't trust you now, so I probably won't be reading that one.
All right, I don't know if you've done this yet.
I have not. LJ showing everybody our on YouTube. Challenge. You can see our reading challenge. It's on our Instagram page. So
you can also see the reflection of my ring light in my phone. It's a big one. But yeah. So I already filled out and actually I need to see, I think it has, I could put Ravensbrück on here for nonfiction, but so
I think I'm going to be an old person and print it out.
Oh, that probably would be better. This is in Pic Collage, which I do pay for the premium membership for that. So I put a book set in winter, 5 Total Strangers happened in winter. I put a book with 500 plus pages. You know what book I put there? Not Ravensbrück.
Which one? Outlander?
Yes.
I'm like, was it 500 pages? I don't know. It was 33 listening hours.
And then I put a fantasy book, One Dark Window, because technically that was. And so now I'm looking here. I guess technically one of the books I read was horror, but I would rather read a Stephen King to count it as a horror. And yes, I want you to know, Leyna, when I was looking, because I started looking, I'm like, one written in the decade that we were born. And I'm so sad to find that some of the Stephen Kings I've already read were in the 80s. And I'm like, oh, they were so good. And then
you're going to have to read Lonesome Dove because...
Is it in the 80s?
It was in the 80s.
But how long is that book?
It is a long book.
Yeah,
is that what you asked, how long it was?
Yes.
Yes, it is a very long book. So I will not be reading it in the month of February because I'm going to be reading romances and sweet short books. I am reading Martyr. It won all kinds of awards last year, but the local neighbors bookstore, they're doing a book club.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to go, but then I feel intimidated because it's not our fun book club. It's a serious capital S book club. So we'll see.
Yeah, that sounds like fun though. I it's funny because you're like, I'm going to read some romance books. And I'm sitting here thinking, I want to read some horror books in February because I remember in high school, one of my friends on Halloween, we went and rented a bunch of not Halloween, on Valentine's Day, we rented a bunch of scary movies. And I'll never forget, we were watching like Halloween. No, it wasn't Halloween. I don't know what we were watching.
Hellraiser.
I have no idea, but it was something. And all of a sudden we hear this loud crash from the kitchen and we go in there and something in the pantry had fallen off the shelf. So then I was like really spooked the rest of the night. And so we're in there and she like jokingly took like a butcher knife out there with her.
Oh God.
And anytime I looked at her, she'd be like maybe she's going to hurt me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, stop it. Like, stop it. It's funny now, but I remember being so freaked out.
I would have been too.
Yeah. But I'm like, I haven't watched a lot of horror movies lately. Did I watch them around Halloween this year? I don't remember. But
I watched a few because I watched Scream. My husband does not like scary movies, so I typically end up not watching them.
Yeah. But... No, I love them. And so I don't know, I might watch a few. I mean, I watch the Scream franchise every year, so I'm not
I do watch Stranger Things, and my son watches that with me.
When is the last season coming out? Is it this
summer? It has to be soon. Like you would think.
Because I need to rewatch all of them before it comes out.
That is a good question because that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I think
definitely.
I want to say, when did that season come out? The last season?
I believe it was in a summer because
I think it was the summer between
was it like
7th and 8th grade for the kids?
Would that have been 2022? Because I will say there's not many shows that I remember us watching, the four of us as a family. And like back then, my husband at the time kind of would resist if there was something that like we were into. He kind of was anti being mainstream. And so like Gavin and I had watched as Stranger Things came out. Like we watched it. And then that summer, right before it came out, he watched all the seasons. And then we watched that season as a family. Because Kaylee, I think it was after Kaylee. Here I go. I said her name like 4 times. After my child, the youngest, caught up, then he was like, okay, well then let's all just watch it together. So, and it was fun.
I just remember Danny and Piper they took an Avid trip to London, and the first episode came out, like the season came out the day that they left. So like the night before. So we were watching the show, trying to get as much of it in as we could before they left. That's what I remember.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, did they drop it half and half?
I think they did. I just remember that one of Danny's friends' mom took Danny and his friend to the mall that had the Stranger Things exhibit thing.
Oh, that's cool.
And Danny took his money that he had been saving to go to London, and he bought an $80 coat
no.
and like a $40 hat.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, what do you mean? He spent $120. That being said, the only thing he bought in London was a Monopoly copy of Stonehenge that we have never played.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute though. That's so cute. I love that. That's so cute. That's fun. So yeah.
Yeah, good times. And we are going to be reading Dream Girl Drama by Tessa Bailey.
We are. And we're going to meet her.
Book club pick for February, and we are meeting her. We're meeting her next week.
I know, that's so crazy.
And she has the funniest Instagram. Like,
oh my gosh,
you'll have to go if you haven't seen her. Yeah,
she's so awesome. And we'll definitely post our pictures because
they're doing professional pictures.
Yeah, so I have a feeling they won't let us do individual and together, but we'll try.
We can try. It never hurts to try.
If you don't ask, the answer is already no. But if you ask, it might be yes. Might not. But
you never know.
You never know.
It's going to be fun either way. And then we're going to go explore Barnes and Nobles.
Always. And we have some other news. 2 things. First of all, we have a new logo. Because,
if you haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen it. So originally the plan was for this podcast to be 4 of us friends. And then due to life circumstances, it was going to be that maybe once a month our 2 other besties were going to be on, and just life is hard when you have kids involved in a lot of activities and they're young. So they'll still visit. They'll still pop on at times when they can. But the reality is it's going to be me and Leyna. And so we're having fun.
A party in and of itself,
It
right
is
there.
a party in and of itself. It means two of us. It means we get to talk more. And we're going to invite other guests. We definitely want to bring Nikki Blake back because she was so much fun. And, we'll have other people visit as well. And so that's one thing. You would tell them the other news, Leyna?
So this will be our last time that we're releasing on a Thursday because we are now going to have More Than a Book Club podcast Mondays.
Woohoo!
So we are moving our release date to Monday. So if you get to next Thursday and don't hear us, that's okay. We'll be back. Yeah. We are evolving as a podcast. We're learning how to do things. And one of the things that we've learned how to do is edit.
And by we, she means that she has learned how to do.
So I'm not perfect. It's not there yet, but we're learning. And one of the things that we've learned is that you need a little bit of time to do that because we were recording and then releasing, and that's just not enough time.
Yeah, in a matter of 6 hours.
Yes. Not even I was staying up late to
4.
edit. Yeah.
4
and trying
hours.
to get things done. So it just wasn't working. So I'm not a night person.
No.
If you told me to do it at 6 a.m., I'd be like, sure.
But I love good alliteration. So yes. More Than a Book Club podcast Monday works really good for me. So we're excited. And that gives Leyna time to do all of her fancy editing as we learn and as she learns.
Hey, we're all learning here together.
That's true. I'm learning other things.
So I think it's been really fun. This is our 12th episode.
Woohoo!
So we've made it. This is 3 months that we've been doing this once a week, basically.
Crazy.
So that's really awesome. I think that we're just going to continue to get better and pick up more listeners and have more fun as we keep going.
Yes. And if no one listens, I'll still talk to myself. I'll still talk to you, Leyna.
I'm having a great time.
Me too.
That's all that matters.
That is all that matters.
It doesn't matter who listens. It just matters that we're having fun.
But we are having fun making friends with those of you that are connecting with us on our social medias. So keep doing it.
We love it.
Yes. All right. Should we say goodbye?
We'll sign off for today, and we'll see you guys all next week.
On Monday. Woohoo! Bye.